Thank you for that heartfelt introduction here. I'm Genghis. I am a Scrum Master at Wand Corporation, which sounds like we're a competitor to Ollivander's, but we're not, unfortunately. We make menu boards and point-of-sale systems for quick service restaurants. So that's what I've been doing for the past year. Prior to that, though, I was the Chief Operating Officer at a company called FizzDap here in the Twin Cities. We made emergency medical training software, basically. There are a couple of FizzDap alum in the room, maybe a FizzDap founder in the room. So yeah, I developed this system after failing pretty hard on a couple hires and getting us into a place where we're paying a cost not only for lost work from a hire not working out, but also having to restart a process and find a solution that took 2, 3, 4 times as long as it could have if we had just put a little bit of work at the front end of something. And I feel like every session at Minibar has something to do with that. Like, put in work first so you don't put in work later. But it's super, super true. Speaking of FizzDap alum. So anyway, I'm Genghis, like I said. I am going to talk a little bit about making decisions when you're hiring, because you tend to know when to hire. You're feeling some pain. I don't think anybody just hires willy-nilly unless you're trying to scale and make yourself look good. For the most part, you know that there's a pain point. The problem is a lot of people don't look at why. They don't look at what is causing the pain. They just know there is some pain, extra work could get done, something like that. So what I want people to think about is, why is a seat empty? And usually that's for one of 3 reasons. We use a system called Traction, or the Entrepreneurial Operating System at Wand, but it's just a way of thinking about how a business runs. The needs for hiring are, you need specialized talent, you need some motivation, or you just need horsepower. We call it that get it, want it, and have capacity for it. In this talk, we're going to assume it's get it or capacity for it, because if it's a motivation issue, that's a culture thing, and we can talk about that, but I'm going to be guessing at that with you too. I'm not an org dev guy, so I can't help you there. But specialized talent and horsepower, these are the things that generally make people feel like, okay, we need a person in a seat. We need to make sure that we're moving people along. So we're going to be talking about, like I said, capacity and get it hires. And the next couple of sections, just to give you, some preview of what's coming, we're going to be talking about building an expectations document and a case study. The expectations document is like an internal job description. It's getting buy-in from people on what the hell do we need to get in the room in order to fill this hire. And then a case study is a way of actually having the candidate prove they can do the job. So that's pretty cool. So your first step on this is interviewing stakeholders. And the reason that I like to do this like it's a project with a deliverable is because if you were going to be buying a piece of software that cost you, 80 to 100 to 150 grand a year, you would study the shit out of that. You would make a case that this was the silver bullet that was going to get you a solution. But we spend that money on hires, and we spend that money on failed hires all the damn time. How many of you in an org have seen a hire where they said, well, we just need someone? Yeah, some nods, and some hands, all right. My boss fell on his sword here and raised his hand. So that's crazy. You're spending not only money, but team morale and resources on a person who's going to try to tank a project, tank a team. Not great. It's okay to leave that empty, to have a little bit less capacity, to have a little bit less of that specialized knowledge than it is to fill it with the wrong person. But most people don't even take the time to define what the right person is. So that's kind of what interviewing stakeholders is about. As a note, if there are any people with a design background or who work with designers, you will know that this interview is not going to give you real answers. You're still going to have to dig, because asking people what they need is an okay way to get somewhere. But what's up?
You're preaching to the choir there.
Exactly. So you don't ask people what they want, because what they tell you is not often what they need. So that's why we interview stakeholders. So you're going to ask questions that help you write the expectations document. But again, it is going to be you writing an expectations document. The first thing you're going to do is ask some questions of the team. These are just examples. These are by no means exhaustive, nor are they applicable to every team. But what do you need from a specialist or just a teammate? What's not getting done? Basically, what do we let people get away with? You know, is there a DevOps cultural thing that you need to improve? Is there unit testing that people punt off because they can snicker with each other about how, oh, we'll figure it out, it works? Is it somebody who's good at making the coffee because everybody just lets it sit there passive-aggressively, unmade? I was a barista for 2 years because I'm that guy with the master's degree who served lattes. So like, I put that on my resume that I will make you damn coffee. I will make it right. Along the lines of what's not happening, what would we do with more capacity? Because a lot of times the answer feels like, let's just get another person in here. Yeah, we'll spread the work out. How? Does your project have room for people to dogpile on more tasks? If it doesn't, maybe your horsepower hire is not right. Maybe you need a specialist. Maybe a hire is not right. Maybe reorienting project management's view of when something can happen is what needs to happen. And I know that's terrifying for somebody. Most of you here probably aren't experienced hiring managers. I would imagine you wouldn't be in a pretty 101 session if you were. But if you're in a role where you're in charge of a hire and then you might have to argue against it, that sucks. But make sure when you're interviewing the team that they have the ability to bring somebody on board and know what that person's gonna do. What qualities matter most? These are the things that people actually tend to be pretty good at. You know, what's our identity as a team? You want to make sure that the team is bought in on that. Specific tech needs, and then I always ask what sucks about this team, and that's just because I'm a Scrum Master and I want to know what to fix. But it's a cool way if somebody, a candidate says, hey, this is a deal breaker, and you're like, that's part of our core identity, man. Maybe you should look at my friend's company. That kind of thing it's legit. And for the record, being able to properly offboard a candidate, and this is just a hint here, into a place where you can recommend them for something means you now have an advocate in the community who is recruiting for you. And I'm bad at recruiting, so that's the only thing I know how to do. So I support it. Be honest, be open, and do your best to get every candidate into a good spot. So that's asking the team. There's a lot of shit you can ask them. I mean, really, anything that they have an opinion on with a hire, take, because you're going to be able to interpret that. Asking the manager is a little different. And I've got another slide that's about asking executives as well, and they may be the same thing. And that's fine. Again, these are just sort of guidelines, examples. But you're going to have to really get your questions set to who your target audience is, because the manager probably isn't going to tell you what sucks on the team unless you've got a good relationship with them. I happen to, but most of the time they're going to be like, everything's great. It could be greater. So you ask the manager, what do you wish we had? Is it a specialist? Is it that guy who makes the coffee? Is it somebody who's calmer? Is your culture pretty high-strung? Deadline-driven cultures tend to get pretty high-strung. Do you need somebody who's a little zen? That's important to know. And the manager is usually in a good spot to know that the team kind of needs that. What does the role actually require? And this is more about like if it currently exists and you're doing a horsepower hire. Like, all right, we say we need X, Y, and Z, and we're going to get to that. We need 5 years of PHP experience, 3 years of JavaScript, and 10 years of Angular. It hasn't existed, but if you can't manipulate linear time, we don't even want to read your application. So that kind of shit can come up. How long can we afford to onboard this person? If you get the right person, but they're going to need to get up to speed on your process, is that okay? That's a frightening cost for a manager, because you're already going to have 6 months to a year to get a developer specifically, but project managers, whatever, up to speed. And if it's going to be a little longer, if you need to teach them some basic office stuff, say they're coming from construction project management and they're moving into software project management, but they have all the skills, is it worth getting them onboarded? It might not be. You need to know what that time frame is. And then a salary hard cap. About 80% of you are never going to get told this if you're not the manager making the hire, because it's a thing people are squirrely about. I love transparency in salary caps because it allows you to really quickly get rid of candidates who are either out of your league or expecting something you can't offer. So that's my spiel on salary transparency. I know certain people in the room will argue with me. And then ask executives. This is a little weird because sometimes you can't. Sometimes they're way too high above you. But your manager's manager, the people who are on a more strategic 30,000-foot view. What are your goals for the team this year? Is it just getting a product done? Is it growing? Is it getting expertise? Is it becoming the most loved tech org in the Twin Cities? If that's the case, then that's a different hire and a different way of hiring than if you're just like, to be honest, man, I just want that manager who's been bugging me for a dev to stop bugging me. That's okay too, but you need to know that. How will the hire be sold to the rest of the company? I've worked in orgs where there's been some tension between development, project management, sales, support. People get specialized treatment. You get a hire, that's a big cookie. Hey, you guys are doing great, we want more of it. And sometimes it's a big fuck you. You guys aren't doing great, we need more of you. And that's okay, but getting a new team member, getting something to celebrate and get excited about is a reward. And that's another thing, if you need a pitch to executive or management about a hire, remind them of that. This is a way to get morale boosted. New bodies, new blood, new emotions, it's great. Even if there's a little bit of chaos, sometimes teams like chaos, because in the chaos you learn how to adapt together. So know about how that's going to get pitched to the rest of the org so you know how to message this. If your support team's going to get cranky because they've been taking phone calls and working late and they don't get extra bodies, but you're going to hire somebody who costs 3 times what it costs to hire a support person, you need to know how to go through that and to sell to the rest of the company why this hire matters to everyone. So after you've sent out those questions, you've talked to people, you're going to do a work audit. And this sounds way more formal than it is. This is like a day, if that. You just got to figure out what's happening. So again, a lot of this is about getting past what we think we need and finding out what actually needs to get done. So look at your accountability chart. You want to see where there are 2 in a box. Where is somebody doing 2 jobs? Where is there a problem of communication? Is there a role that can fill that niche? I'm a Scrum Master, so I value this like probably way more than a lot of people in the room because my job is to find those little bits that get in the way and smooth them out. It's a disgusting disease I have. But you're going to want to go find evidence for what you've been hearing. So you're going to need to look at Zendesk or Jira and compare it to your key performance indicators. Like, all right, we think we need horsepower because we need more support people. And I'm looking at some people I've worked with on support, and we knew that. We thought we needed that. Probably what we actually needed was to give ourselves permission to spend a month making our documentation better, making a more accessible training. Because when we onboarded people, we now had so much less time to actually get done what we needed because we were in the middle of training, we were covering for mistakes. That was one of the mistakes I made when I deviated from this system. We hired 2 support people figuring like, great, we're going to ease that load, it's going to be awesome. And honestly, that was not the answer we had needed. The answer we had needed was, let's make sure that our users have access to what they need to learn our system. So make sure you're actually hiring for something. Again, this is finding evidence. And then look for required specialization. This is sort of on the same ball. Like, do you actually need an Angular specialist? Because if you don't, it's going to make your hiring pool a lot bigger. You guys, Paul's not in the room, but you guys know what unemployment is for tech in the Twin Cities? It's voluntary. It's less than 2%. For PHP devs, it's some obnoxious number, like 1 point something. Like, it's terrifying. So if you're looking for a very specialized person, it's going to take you a while. And that's OK. That's better than hiring the wrong person. But make sure you actually need it. And make sure the team talks about what you need. Make sure you look at the amount of code or projects left that are requiring that specialization. Because you may not have that much left, and then maybe you don't need a specialist on board. You can get the team built up instead. So the important question is whose neck is on the line? Somebody is making this hire. It's probably you if you're in this room. And you need to make sure that if this goes wrong, you're the one accountable. So you want to make sure that you know exactly what's coming and how this person is going to be brought into your organization. So you got to know who's training this person. It can be a group, but you want people who have a point. Like, If this person has a question, they come to you. Probably it shouldn't be the junior dev who just transitioned over into development, training on a new dev, or a project manager who slid up from QA, training in another project manager. But maybe it is because they just went through that. So make sure you're picking the appropriate person. Do you have your onboarding ready? It sucks to show up to work your first day and people are like, well, you're just going to be a sponge man today. You're just going to absorb some stuff because we didn't think it was important to get you what you needed to succeed at this job right away. Plan out what their first week looks like, 2 weeks, a month. Maybe it is just meetings. Maybe they're just learning about your culture. But you want to make sure that you have that planned out and stated so that if they feel bored, if they feel like they're not doing anything, you say, it's okay, we didn't want to overwhelm you. If you need to go and surf Reddit for a while to decompress, that's totally expected. But you have to make sure that's clear, because if you don't, and you don't tell them what their onboarding looks like, they're going to feel like they're screwing up or like you didn't really want them. And then last, construct an expectations document. This is actually a thing I created in order to remediate people. Basically, if somebody screws up or is not reaching what the organization's expectations are, go back to this document and say, hey, this is what you agreed to. It actually has ended up being way more useful in hiring than for that, because once you're at the remediation step, a lot of times people then take that as a, hey, go find a different job. But for hiring, it's great. These just cover the very basics of what the role covers. So you got, in this case, it's a product manager, because doing something for dev, I would very clearly be out of my depth. But we need a thorough knowledge of actual users, creation and maintenance of a backlog, a roadmap, collaboration with, not dictation to, team members. So some of this is not just, here's a task. A lot of it is about how do we do the work as well. You're committing not just to getting stuff done, but you're committing to the way that this team thinks about that work. And then there's also some specifics here, because I like to lay that out. Like, get excited. In this case, we got a new product called the Afterburner. That's your shit, man. We need you to do that. That's your job. This is your life for the next 6 months. Get people excited with every piece of your hiring. Because you can show this expectations document once somebody's through the first screen. Show it to them. This is really what this role is. Ideally, you've written your job description so that it matches something like this, because your job descriptions suck. It's okay, so does everybody's. Not only just because people have this giant thing of text that nobody ends up reading. They say 5 years. Yeah, I can pretend I have 5 years. Great. But because people lie. They try to go too far in the other direction. Instead of having the giant flood of text, they have a little bit of information in there, and then, hey man, we got a keg, we got a foosball table, we play ping pong every Wednesday. Is that your freaking culture? Really? I don't think so. If it is, I want to know where you work, and I want to know how that's profitable, because man, that sounds great. But even good job descriptions suck, because you're trying to convey culture, and you're trying to convey team membership in blank text. And if you make a video because you think that's going to work, people aren't going to watch the video. So you're sort of stuck between some places. But the most important thing in a job description, and I would actually argue that if you had to pick 2 sentences to put into a job description to sell it, is to put your core values front and center. You got to make sure that people know who you are and what you care about. Interesting work is the thing that drives people in tech. Again, unemployment in this industry is so low that it's ludicrous. So you got to make them want it. And you do that with your core values. Who the hell are you? Atlassian and Facebook have some pretty cool core values. A company I work for has some as well. Commitment, drive, positive attitude. But these are ways of marketing. So open company, no bullshit at Atlassian. You can tell anybody anything. But you got to have it. Because if that's not true, people are going to look on Glassdoor. And the first thing they're going to see is, no bullshit? Bullshit. So you got to own that. Build with heart and balance. So they're creators. They're makers. They take pride in the actual making of the item, which is proven out by their whole ship it thing at Atlassian. Don't fuck the customer. They are, first and foremost, a service company. They provide value to their customers. And then play as a team. So it's okay to mess around, but there'd better be value to the org. Facebook has similar ones. I'm not going to read through them all. But that's what you're selling with your core values. You're not saying, we're we're a very all-American group, and we want you to feel happy being here. You're saying, here's what it's like to work here, man. If play as a team doesn't appeal to you, probably don't apply at Atlassian. So just a couple of guidelines here, and again, these are not exhaustive. It's just some stuff to think about. With personality, don't write like a machine, and don't write for a machine. Every time I get an application that feels like somebody has a cover letter that's designed to be read by an algorithm, I throw up in my mouth a little. But we write job descriptions that are meant to be looked at by an algorithm. Of course, that's what they give us. So write real, but don't front. Don't act like you're a party culture if you're not. It's totally OK to admit that you're not programmers who love to chug beer and stay 16 hours a day cranking out the most bodacious code. But if you are, don't fucking act like you are a contemplative, relaxed bunch, because the person who comes in is going to hate you. And you're going to attract the right candidates, too. You know, Wand is a very low-key place, but everybody's super passionate. If we acted like we were partying all the time, we would get some people who were a big culture clash there. But our team's super effective, we have fun, and we like working with each other. So be proud of that stuff, but make sure it's clear. Responsibilities. Honestly, this is why is the work interesting. This is part of that expectations document, but you're going to give that to candidates later. So boil that down into the interesting work they're going to be doing. And remember that you're selling the team. If you're very much about sending people into a room, be the smartest person you can, pump out code. You're maybe at a security firm, and you need a developer who can just do amazing things with crypto. OK, probably like your ability to communicate with your team is less important than your ability to be like ridiculous at math. But if you're a PM at a collaborative organization or at an agency, maybe I actually care a little bit less about your ability to put together a perfect backlog than I do about your ability to massage the relationships between teams. So sell what that dynamic is. That's what responsibilities are. All of this is marketing. You're trying to get somebody in the door. You'll talk about the details once you've got them. And then experience. This pisses me off a lot. Do you want years or fluency? Because I've got a guy sitting in here who's been developing for a year and a half that I put against some colleagues I knew who worked for 5 years, 6 years, developing. Boot camps are great. Self-taught people are great. Maybe years is less important than how good somebody is at something. Maybe it's not. There is a pretty strong argument that a senior dev has a different responsibility than just being really good at something, or that a senior PM is not there because they've got chops that have been honed up to a certain level. It's that they've literally seen more crap. That's real. But make sure you know that, because most of the time what you mean is fluency. And then nice to haves, no shit. OK, yeah, we all want the best programmer in the world to come work for us. We all want an amazing VP of sales to walk in the door who's been selling for enterprise systems for 20 years and invented the way that we do commission structures in our field. But like, do you need it? No. So don't put the nice to haves. Like, that makes me roll my eyes every time, and I honestly have never gotten excited because I had a nice to have, because there's always a dozen. So the case study, this is actually like the reason I give this talk. This is a way of figuring out if a candidate's going to be able to do the job without making them sit for 8 hours, 10 hours doing a project. If you've got enough qualified candidates that you can get somebody to sit for 8 hours and sift through those results, cool. I want to know how you're doing it. Maybe you're Google, I guess. But in the Twin Cities, you're fighting for people's attention. So giving somebody an 8-hour challenge is just them. Maybe they'll do it. Maybe. Maybe they had a soccer game, so they didn't. So case studies, they are a unique task to your domain, but they're not about the specific thing you do. So when I worked in EMS software, I had people do climbing gear. Not because it was at all related, but because it was high stakes. So there were really important pieces of this. And also because it could be broken down into components. So specifically for a project manager, which is what the example document, go ahead and you can actually take a look at it. Especially for that project manager one, what it meant was they had to figure out what was different between safety and emergency stuff and nice to have features that would sell. So that was a balance that I struck in there. For this demonstration case study, it's actually kitchen equipment, just because I can have a user interview that breaks down into some questions that they can turn into a backlog. But what you're doing is you are testing for why you're hiring. This is why we did all that work with the interviews and the expectations document and actually looking at Jira, Zendesk, and all of that and figuring out what the hell do we actually need, because the case study is going to allow you to target that. It's not a stress test, though. Again, I've worked in EMS, so I know what an emergency is. I bet nobody in tech here has a situation that's a real emergency. It's going to feel like it. It's going to feel like it when you don't have DNS resolving and you've got 1,000 customers who are calling you. But I've been literally on the phone with people who've had to go because they have to go save someone's life. So keep that in mind. You don't want to try to stress out your candidates more than they already are going to be. And almost certainly, you are not testing for their ability to deal with that stress. 3 or 4 hours total. Honestly, I like 3. I get that sometimes it's hard with development to do 4, not to do 4 or 5, and as best as you can. That's okay. But if you're going to have somebody do half a day of work, you should probably pay them, is the way I think about it. And there are places that do that. I've interviewed at places that have said, to do the job for a day, we'll pay you. That's cool. You can do that and you get people to agree. That's a great case study. But make sure that's also planned. Just like onboarding, you don't want to have somebody just sort of faff around and then judge if they're going to be a good coworker. What you want to do is make sure that you're testing. Everything is a gate. Everything is giving you information you need to know for, are you going to hire this person or no? So you're welcome to take a look at that. Like I said, the link's there. I look for breaking it down into epics and stories, possibly even some roadmap stuff. So if you have questions about that specific case study, just come ask me afterwards. The interview rhythm is pretty cool. This is a thing that I had never thought about until I was a sales manager, a job I hated. But you need a rhythm of battle in order to deal with a huge load of calls, interactions, interviews, getting people on board in the building and making sure your team knows it's coming. It's super painful if you don't actually plot it out. So your interview rhythm, you got to explain the whole thing to the candidate as well as your team. No surprises. Because if somebody has a phone interview with you and they love you and they don't hear from you for a week and a half, they probably just got a different job offer. Remember, super low unemployment in the Twin Cities. Keep that in your head every moment of hiring. So just tell them, hey, it's going to be a week and a half because we've got people out. We're developing something. We've got a retreat. It's really cool. Let me tell you about this awesome retreat our company's going on. But we're not going to be able to get back to you until a week and a half from now. But we will. Make sure that that's very clear because every step is also a gate, both for you and for the candidate. Your candidate is going to be judging you just as much as you're judging them. Like I said, all of this is marketing. So phone screen's got to make sure a candidate is a culture fit and actually interested in filling the real role we've spent a bunch of time defining. And it's okay if they're not. You could really like them. Don't make them interview for this one for 5-6 hours over a month if you know that they're probably not really the candidate for this role. But tell them, God, it sounds like you really don't want this, like what we have right now, but we would love to have you in for an interview when we have something for you. Can I reach out to you? That's a great way of building that network and making people want to check your job site every now and then. So for interview rhythm, we have one phone interview, generally around half an hour. That's super different if you're hiring salespeople or support people because they're going to be working on the phone probably. So if it's a phone job, it's probably okay to do an hour-long phone screen, but you want to have done some sort of preliminary stuff to make sure you're not wasting your time or theirs. But if you're interviewing a PM, a dev, any role that I'm just skipping because early, half an hour for the phone interview. Have a script, but mostly just know the kinds of answers you're looking for. You do one case study. You want to send that case study off. You want to make sure it's very clearly time-bound. You send it out, say, hey, you're going to have 3 or 4 hours for this. When can I send it to you? You send it to them, and you make sure that when they get it in, it's within that time bound. Now, it can be via email, via Git. You've kind of got to work that stuff out yourself. But if you say they have 3 or 4 hours, don't give them 48. It's super hard not to do that, by the way, because like you don't want to stress people out. The problem is, especially with things that are technical, where enough time is enough time on Stack Overflow to get somebody to do it for you. You want to avoid that, but you also don't want to punish people because probably all your devs are also looking at Stack Overflow. That's probably what you want. So like, also don't punish people for that, but make sure that you give them the actual time bounding. And then you have 1 or 2 in-person interviews. I like 1 because when I'm looking for a job, taking PTO twice, 3 times maybe, to go interview somewhere sucks, especially if you don't get the job. You hate that company now. Marketing, you don't want people telling their friends that they wasted their time with you. So remember that. But sometimes you can't avoid it, and like that's just how it is. So here's an example interview rhythm. Again, no planned service contact with a candidate, and that's okay. Showing that you're adaptable and the candidate proving to you that they can communicate sometimes disappointment. Hey guys, I know I said I would get that case study done tomorrow. I just realized I have to watch, I just got my kids. Their mom dropped them off with me. Can we move that case study? That's not them not having commitment to you. They reached out to you. Reward that. That's what you want from a coworker, from an employee. You want them to clearly communicate when things change. The same way, again, you better communicate with them. So you see, this is like an ideal 2-week one. Probably it's going to be longer for you as you get used to doing this, just from dealing with volume of stuff coming in. But you'll note that I stack a lot of stuff, like phone interview, and then the case study is scheduled. These are all gates. If they pass the gate, don't act like you gotta like deliberate on something. Just get to the next step. This process is designed to cut people out when they're cut out and move them through when they're moving through. That's it. Don't act like you're some great philosopher of hiring, like none of us are. But yeah, once it's going through, we have the case study review, which is probably the only other thing on this that I want to talk about, because we're about to talk about interviewers and interviewing, and you want to make sure that everybody has had a chance to look at the case study. That case study is not to prove to you, the hiring manager, that this candidate can do something. The case study is to prove to the team that this is somebody they can work with. You want, especially in a situation where you have highly technical people, you want technical introverts especially, to be able to talk about something they actually have in common with this person. Why did you choose to use this component instead of that component? As a PM, why did you prioritize this epic over this one when this is clearly a safety issue? You want to have those conversations. So that case study review, around 3 hours, that's per candidate. So like, it's a lot of work. And maybe it doesn't take 3 hours, maybe it takes half an hour. But you have to have the team ready, because when you do the in-person interviews, when the team says, I looked at the case study, yeah, I want to talk to this person, you got to be ready to move. So the interview criteria, we can roll through this quick. Selecting interviewers, sometimes everybody wants to interview, sometimes nobody wants to interview. I say a couple small groups. I like 2 groups of 2, but like that's arbitrary. I just kind of made that up. It feels good. One-on-one feels like an interrogation sometimes. When I interviewed at Wand, it was a room full of like 10 people at a go 2 or 3 times, which is great for me. As you can tell, I like having an audience, so that was okay. But I can imagine it might have intimidated other people. I wouldn't suggest just hoarding people, unless that's part of the job. If it's managing a giant team and trying to wrangle everybody and herd cats, you can test that in the interview. How well do you do with 10 people in a room? Don't overwhelm the candidate, though, because that's just going to make them hate you and tell their friends never to apply. See a trend in what goes wrong and the problems I've had before? You want to control for diversity with your couple of groups. So roles, seniority, gender, and race. Every time I've thought, I think we're past that. I've had a situation where I've had somebody be like, he never made eye contact with me. Oh. Or, yeah, every time this candidate answered something, he was specifically avoiding giving an answer to the woman in the room. Good to know. Probably, if they're going to be working with women on a team, not somebody you want. Or possibly they didn't have any context awareness. They didn't realize that I was senior, even though I introduced myself that way. And they were talking down to me like I didn't know my job. So like that's the kind of stuff you want to know, and that's again, everything's a gate. Every interviewer has to be all in. This is a huge commitment, like a big time commitment. But again, you're making between, I mean, low end 40K a year, high end 200K a year when adjusted for possible commissions or benefits or whatnot. Like you're spending a lot. So you're going to get a big return on investment here if you do it right. So make sure everybody's all in and they really, really put the time in. And then get buy-in on the expectations document. You want to make sure that when people read that, they're like, yeah, this is the role we want. Because if somebody's like reading through that and they're like, nope. Now you're not really having the proper gates because you're going to have certain people looking for some characteristics and other interviewers looking for other ones. Not awesome. So interview collateral. This is the stuff you're going to give to your interviewers to prep them because most of these people probably aren't experts. You're going to give them a completed case study. Again, there's some time to review that. You can give them the expectations document. Again, they need to all be on the same page as to what we're looking for. No either or questions. If I say, do you like doing this or that? Well, a little both. Right there, every time. Every single time. Or it depends on context. No shit. But that's not the candidate's fault. That's your fault. And it's OK to ask, tell me about when you would use X, Y, or Z, or when you would do X, Y, or Z. That's great. You're never going to get an actual either or answer, so just don't do it. Also, and this is something that people fight me on, so I'm going to hide, but 4 to 6 questions per group total. Really, 4 to 6 questions. The idea here is that if you have a long script, people sacrifice real answers in order to stay on script. Not great. So what you want to do is make sure that answers beget more questions. That's all the interview is. So 4 to 6 questions per group. That's really what it comes down to. And then actually interviewing. You want to just be clear with the candidate. And you can read, so I don't need to go through this. But you can hit a home run with a candidate just by being a real person. Describe what you expect and give them what they're going to need to succeed in this interview, where, when, who they're going to be talking to. But in the interview, make sure your people feel like they are the most on top of their shit, because that's a great way to impress somebody. No dead silences. That's why we have those questions. If you're done, great. Let's go see if the other group's ready. If not, can I get you a cup of coffee? Again, answers beget more questions. And then you got to make sure that when you're taking notes, because you will, you make eye contact sometimes. Because probably if you're writing on paper, people don't think you're just goofing off in your head. But it's much easier to get buy-in and to feel like you're having a real conversation with your future coworkers if you make somebody laugh, if you make eye contact with them. And then respect time boxes, which I am in danger of not doing here. But also you're...
11 minutes left.
Yes. All right. Well, then as a note, coaching interviewing sucks. Everyone's bad at it right away because nobody has any practice at it. That's a real thing. It's a real thing you're going to have to deal with. If you're in the room with some of your interviewers, give them feedback. It's cool. It's good to be a good interviewer. I bet that's something you don't put on your resume, is it? If you're one. I do. Because if you're good at interviewing and you're asked to build this team, you're now the go-to. That's a huge value to have on a team. The ability to give good interview. I'm hiring that person. If I got 2 exactly equal candidates, one's good at interviewing, one has no experience at it but has some other technical chop, I'm going with the one who's going to help me build a team. So coach your team on interviewing. If they don't want that feedback, maybe they weren't the right people to have interviewing this time. The only way to get good at it, though, is to botch it a couple of times and learn from that and be clear with the candidate if you messed up, if you said something out of place or whatever. Again, be people, because if somebody screws up at work, that's what you want them to do with you. So be clear. So you've just had a bunch of interviews. You've just had struggles through a couple of weeks of getting through your interview rhythms. And then you've got more than one candidate who fits your expectations document. I wish. I actually did have this problem when I was hiring salespeople, of all things. I complain about that job a lot, but it's probably the thing that taught me the most. Dealing with multiple candidates sounds like an awful problem. It's obviously great. The thing is, numerical rubrics, not great, Bob.gif. They are way, way more subjective than the objectivity of numbers leads you to believe. I've read a bunch of hiring books, and the reason that I consider this a 101 is because Who and some other really great hiring books have a sort of numerical or a gesture towards an objective way of hiring, and I don't know that I am smart enough to do that. But I know that I'm socially smart enough to work with this system. Numerical rubrics feel like an easy, objective way to stop two of your teammates, two of your coworkers, from fighting about the candidates they prefer. Part of that is they should just fight, because maybe they'll get to something. But if you can't get consensus, ask the team, would you be willing to work with both or all these people? Because if they say, yeah, this is cool, because you've got 3 opportunities to get this one right. And don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Because if you've done your job, any choice is going to be a good one by the time they're to the point where you're considering giving an offer. Don't vapor lock by oh, what if I make the wrong call? It's stressful, and you're going to be freaked out about it, and you're going to second guess yourself. But ultimately, you've done everything you could. You've done your due diligence. You got to take a shot, and you got to be excited about it. If you're not excited about it, that's the wrong choice. That's the wrong call. But everything else, you hire who you hire, and this process is supposed to get you to a point where you don't need to be scared of it. The other thing is you focus on expectations and actual need. I'm super charismatic. You probably don't know that. I can talk my way into a lot of orgs, and I would be really, really, really shitty at a lot of jobs. I was really shitty at a couple jobs. But people like me, so they want to hire me. That's not why you hire somebody. Maybe for sales. I guess it was for sales and support, that was OK. But you don't want to just have the person who's the best at talking about their resume. That's not who you want. You don't want the person who happens to share a hobby. I know that if I ever interviewed with Sam, I would just tell him how much I love board games, and I would be his candidate to the death. So you got to make sure that you drive the team back to focus on expectations and actual needs. And I pick on Sam because I know for a fact that I could also say, so are they going to be able to clean up our web services? And Sam would say, no. And then we would know. So that's why you want to focus on those expectations and needs. Once you do get an offer, which is coming up, but I want to just make a point here. Once you have decided on a candidate, and you've gotten a yes and a thumbs up, and everybody's celebrating, and you drink from the keg of glory, make sure you reject candidates well. Explain why you like them. If they get far enough that you've got a relationship with them here, that's your farm team, guys. Explain why the fit was better with a different candidate, and what you're doing next steps. And then ask their permission to reach out when you're hiring next for something they would be a fit for. And do it. Actually do it. People say, can we keep your resume on file? Because we really liked it. And then you don't hear back from them. You get an email 6 months after you applied somewhere. You've got a new job. You're having fun. And it's Eric saying, hey, just wanted to see how that lasted. I knew you were looking for a gig, and you were unhappy where you were. We really like meeting you. We want to have you in for an interview. But what are you up to? Oh, you've got a new job? Cool. Hey, if you want to get coffee, though, talk about what you like there, let me know. That relationship turns into either a recommendation later. Because everybody gets these recruiters. Instead of saying, oh, I want you to do this job, they say, do you know anyone who wants this job? I mean, it's freaking transparent. But if that's true, if you're saying, I valued you as a candidate, so I value your judgment as a candidate, that's a pretty awesome way to feed your hopper and solve the recruitment problem that Paul dines out on by giving a talk every year that we all listen to rapturously. So yeah, that's dealing with candidates. And then making an offer. This is actually the thing that you probably need to worry about least, because you probably have somebody in the org who's done this before, because you probably got hired, but maybe not. Maybe you're a founder. That's cool. This is way less boilerplate than you think. There are boilerplate or offer letters, but they're all over the damn place. So as a note, verbal agreements are great, but don't celebrate yet. Anybody in the room remember when I hired a sales guy and we got him all excited for a national conference and then he revoked it? Yeah, that was cool. So don't celebrate. Don't make it public knowledge that you've hired somebody until they're actually hired. Include specifics on salary and title. That's the only thing I get specific on in offer letters. Not because there's some problem with being more specific, but because you don't want to get yourself in a position where you've described something in paragraph form that doesn't actually fit what the contract is. And this shouldn't be a contract. This should be an offer letter. Broad strokes on everything else, and I mean that's bonus, insurance, PTO, perks, whatever. As a note, as a former sales manager, salespeople will say, what's the commission structure? And you'll say, here's the commission structure. And they'll say, okay. Because they don't know your domain. They don't know what they can expect. They're taking your word for how much money they're going to make off that commission structure. They have no idea. But they're going to want it, so sure, lay it out, make sure it's clear. And then put a hard deadline on signed acceptance. People will push this shit out for like a week. You're like, what are you doing in that week, man? Because if you're just using us to play against somebody, this relationship just got tainted. I don't love that. So put that hard deadline on acceptance. If they can't hit it, work with them. I'm not saying be a jerk. It's just like, it's going to take you more than 3 days to make this decision. What could we have done better? Why is this such a question? I get you got to talk to your spouse. You have to check your financials. You have to do all that. But like, if you need a week, you're playing me against your current boss. I don't love that. So yeah, that's really all I have there. Once it's, as I said, a signed offer letter and you drink from the keg of glory, make sure that as you're onboarding people, you're communicating clearly. They know what's coming. But aside from that, I guess I'm open for like a question. What's going on?
You mentioned the phrase culture fit.
Yeah.
I was wondering how you keep diversity
Mm-hmm.
and inclusion, like how you keep your organization diverse.
Mm-hmm.
If most of the tech world is, dominated by white males,
Mm-hmm.
how do you make sure that women and minorities become part of your organization and keep that going?
Your culture should value those people and should value absent voices. That's a phrase I use a lot, and I don't know where I got it, so I always hesitate to do it in public because I'm sure I stole it. I always value absent voices as an actual piece of criteria on a candidate because building culture around filling those absent voices leads to, as you say, more inclusion. But also, what was that line in the keynote or session 0? Point of view is worth 50 IQ points. The more points of view you have, the better. And I think your culture would benefit from maybe adopting some requirements of diversity or some value of diversity. Other stuff? What's up?
Any tips on what you tell candidates when you had a bad hire in that seat before?
I will tell them we had a shitty hire in the seat before, but I think that I can get away with that because I don't know, I swear a lot. It makes me more approachable, I don't know. Yeah, if you're talking about a bad hire, you talked about, we're really making sure that these expectations are met because the last time we hired, they weren't. So we're making this clear. We're not saying that this is hard-nosed, we're trying to fit you into a box that corporate created. We know that this is what we need.
So I didn't give him much of an introduction in the beginning because I didn't know you until now.
That's right.
As somebody who's actually in the talent acquisition and consulting business, that's the most intentional process I've ever heard a company talk about. And bar none, if all companies did what you just described, I would love working for all of my clients. So,
Well, and you already do.
And while we're giving testimonials, I attended your talk last year,
Mhm.
and it really influenced the way that I do hiring. And we've started using case studies in a much more intentional way. And
Awesome.
I do use them with rubrics, and I would love to talk to you more about
Yeah,
how to do that.
yeah.
It's actually been extremely helpful.
Oh, good.
But the case study approach has been so awesome. So you guys should all try it. It's really worthwhile. Takes
Awesome.
time to put together.
seconded.
So during the interview process, do you ever look at how mentorable a candidate is? How well do you take feedback?
Definitely I do, and that is totally, no, yes, I've never made that intentional,
Yep.
but yeah, I think that absolutely can go in the expectations document.
Yeah.
You know, you take feedback, you adapt.
Yeah, because some of the feedback I got in my hiring practice is I'm a tough interviewer because I didn't ask a lot of open questions.
Yeah,
But
which you should.
Is, especially junior candidates, how can I put you in a position in which you are going to express you don't know something that I know to see how you absorb it when I tell you the answer?
That's me.
Do you shut down, close off, and just walk away?
Yeah.
Do you engage with me? Tell me more. What website? You know, what how do I learn more about that?
That's awesome. So I don't know if everybody could hear him saying that. He's talking about mentorability of a candidate, and that's an amazing thing to hit on. It's the sort of thing you kind of get around, but literally creating one of those 4 to 6 questions about not just what happens when you don't know an answer. I Google it, of course, but set them up, give them a scenario where they have to tell you, maybe in the interview space, I don't know. And again, don't overwhelm them, don't freak them out with it. Coach them through, you can even explain, this is getting at this, guys. I'm just hearing about how you take mentorship. It's okay to get people into the secret sauce. They really appreciate seeing how the sausage is made during an interview.
Yeah, that removes the stress.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's an awesome piece of advice. Think we're good?
So I don't want to cut off questions, but there's only 5 minutes between sessions,
Yeah.
and somebody else has to get in here, and you guys would probably have something else on your agenda to get to. So thank you very much. That was awesome.